Wait, David's mom cut us out? Jenna's voice shook as she reread the letter. Across the kitchen, David, her husband, just stared. He was Marlene's only child. They'd planned on that inheritance, even practiced her eulogy while she recovered from a stroke. But Marlene had heard every word. Now she'd rewritten everything. Her will, her legacy, and their roles in her life. And this time, they were nothing but a cautionary tale. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. They said my name like it was already on a headstone. Marlene stopped mid-step, the rubber toe of her slipper pressing silently into the hardwood floor outside the kitchen. Her fingers tightened around the hallway's doorframe, heart stuttering beneath her thin cardigan. The walls of the house she had lived in for over 30 years had never felt this foreign, never this cold. Mom would have wanted it simple, David said. His voice floated through the open kitchen door, muffled slightly by the hum of the dishwasher. She will want it simple, Jenna corrected, crisp and calm, like she was choosing a wedding invitation. White lilies, not roses. Classy, not sentimental. Marlene's breath caught. She leaned closer, the mild ache in her recovering left side flaring, but she didn't care. She held herself completely still. She always loved the idea of music, David added. That old hymn, the one from Grandma's funeral. What was it? Abide with me. Jenna's voice was sharper now, irritated. But honestly, that feels a little churchy. I think we should go more poetic. Something from Mary Oliver? Would Greg be okay doing a reading? David asked. I'll ask. He's not as emotionally available as you, Jenna said with a laugh. Another laugh followed. David's. Familiar, but not in the way Marlene remembered. It was low, casual, distant. She couldn't move. Her ears burned. It was like listening to a play about herself, cast and directed by people who barely knew the story. They said my name, she whispered under her breath, like I'm already gone. The tea she had come out to brew was forgotten. The ache in her left arm from the stroke, the stiffness in her shoulder. It all faded behind the searing clarity of what she was hearing. You think we'd have the reception here or at the country club? Jenna asked. She was opening something. Marlene heard the crinkle of plastic, then the soft click of a pen. We should probably write this down. I don't want to forget any details. David exhaled. You're right, it's weird, isn't it? Planning it while she's still in the other room? Jenna lowered her voice. It's not weird, it's responsible. She's had 2 mini-strokes. She sleeps 12 hours a day. She forgot her own PIN number last week. We'd be stupid not to plan. Marlene's jaw tightened. She hadn't forgotten her PIN. She'd mistyped it once at the pharmacy with Jenna hovering behind her like a shadow. I'm just saying, Jenna continued, if the inevitable happens sooner than later, at least we'll be ready. And after the insurance clears. A pause. Marlene's spine tingled. We can finally get the lake house. There it was. Not grief, not even pre-grief. Just logistics. Money. A clean inheritance path lined with white lilies and tasteful readings. Marlene stepped back into the hallway, her knees suddenly unstable. Her hand grazed the photo on the wall. David at 6, grinning wide, a missing front tooth, clinging to her shoulders as she crouched behind him. She remembered the day they took it. He'd made her promise never to cut her hair because he liked when it covered his face in hugs. She turned from it now. In the living room, the chair they insisted she rest in all day stared back at her like a trap. The blanket folded on the armrest, the pill organizer on the coffee table. They were props in a play she didn't audition for. Back in the kitchen, the conversation had shifted. Jenna was asking about cremation costs. David was clicking his pen. Marlene moved slowly, deliberately, back into her bedroom. She eased the door closed, her breath shaky, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. Then she sat down at her desk, pulled open the drawer where she kept her old file folders, and placed a blank notebook in front of her. She wrote across the top, in block letters, Living Evidence. Underneath it, she wrote the date. Then the first entry, overheard David and Jenna rehearsing my eulogy, while I was alive, in the next room. She stared at the sentence for a long time. Then she picked up her pen again and wrote, "They don't know I heard them. But they will." They weren't grieving. They were budgeting. That sentence lived in Marlene's mouth like a stone she couldn't swallow. It repeated itself each time she passed their bedroom door, each time she heard the printer whir to life behind the closed office David used when he worked from home. That night, they called it a check-in. "We were just planning, Mom," David had said over dinner. "You know, being prepared. It's not morbid. It's responsible." "Exactly," Jenna chimed in, setting down her fork. "It's what people do when they love someone. They plan. You wouldn't want us scrambling, would you?" They looked at her like they'd done something noble. Marlene nodded quietly and cut her chicken. The taste never registered. The air around her felt dry, artificial, like the moments before a dentist lowers the chair and tells you to just relax. She had been reduced to a timeline, a variable, a transaction they were pre-spending. It wasn't her death they feared, it was the inconvenience of not profiting from it. That night, after they went upstairs, Marlene moved quietly through the house. Her slippers made soft hushes against the wood floor as she walked to the small fireproof box she kept under the hutch in the dining room. Her fingers, a little stiff with arthritis, spun the lock. Inside were her real records. Documents not even David had bothered asking about for years, tax returns, account summaries, her own will from 2013, passwords scribbled on slips of paper and yellowing envelopes. She gathered it all and placed it into a tote bag lined with a zippered inner pocket. The weight of the bag grounded her. She wasn't just reacting now, she was preparing differently. Later, in the quiet of her room, she sat on the edge of her bed and stared at a framed photo of David at his college graduation. He was 23, arms flung around her shoulders, the two of them laughing, his cap crooked. She remembered everything about that day. The heat, the ache in her feet from standing, the check she wrote to cover the final semester that financial aid didn't, the interest she was still paying off back then on her own credit card. Another memory rose. COVID lockdown. Jenna out of work, David furloughed, their faces hollowed with anxiety over Zoom. Marlene had sent them money every 2 weeks without being asked. She skipped her own dental appointments that year. And then the mortgage, how David had come to her, hat in hand, saying, "We'll never get approved unless someone co-signs. Just for the paperwork, Mom. You won't ever have to worry." But now she was the worry. Now they spoke about her in the past tense, her name threaded through discussions about floral arrangements and cremation packages. She was no longer the woman who saved them. She was the inevitability, standing between them and a lakeside deck with Adirondack chairs. The next morning, Marlene waited until they left for the grocery store. She moved slowly but deliberately into David's office. The chair still held the faint warmth of his body. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. She sat down and opened his laptop. He never logged out of anything. On the desktop was a folder labeled Estate Planning. She opened it. Budgets, quotes, timeline estimates. And then, tucked between them, a scan of a life insurance policy with her name in bold across the top. She blinked. She'd never signed this. Not this version. Not with that clause. Her eyes narrowed as she leaned in. There was a signature. Her own name, curved and slightly shakier than it should have been. She recognized the loop of the M, the familiar tail of the E. But the date was wrong, the timing was off, the ink looked like it had been lifted and stamped. It wasn't hers. Not really. She sat back, breath catching in her chest. Her hand trembled as she reached for her phone and snapped a photo of the document. Then she opened a blank note and typed, "Forged insurance signature. Confirm not my doing." Underneath it, she wrote, "This is not planning. This is premeditation." If I was going to be buried, Marlene thought, I'd choose the plot myself. The sun cut through the sheer curtains in thin, golden lines as she lowered herself onto the mat in the physical therapy room. Her joints ached. Her breath came faster than she liked. But every strained step, every deep knee bend was deliberate. Measured resistance against the grave they were digging with spreadsheets and silence. "2 more, Marlene," the therapist said, gently steadying her elbow. "Don't lock your knees." I know, she said, forcing breath into her words. I'm not in a rush. Not anymore. She completed the session without complaint. As the younger patients filtered out, chatting about retirement plans and backyard renovations, Marlene sat on the bench by the lockers and pulled out her phone. One message blinked unread, the reply from Elaine C., St. James Lutheran. Call this woman. She did my brother's will, sharp, discreet, and doesn't talk down to you. Name, Tasha Meyer, Esquire. Marlene saved the contact and sent a simple text. Referral from Elaine C. Can we meet? By the time she made it home, she had a reply. Yes, tomorrow. Discreet is standard. The next morning, she wore her best old wool coat and a plum lipstick she hadn't touched since David's wedding. She told Jenna she had a follow-up at the clinic and took the bus downtown, hand wrapped tightly around her tote bag. Inside were her birth certificate, the forged insurance printout, and her original will from 2013. Tasha Meyer's office sat above a stationery shop, the kind of place that smelled like leather folios and eucalyptus oil. The lawyer herself was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with a voice that didn't rush or fill silence unnecessarily. You're sure you want to rewrite the entire will? Tasha asked, flipping through the file. I'm sure, Marlene said. Her voice didn't waver. And I want a clause, something that blocks any beneficiary who pressures or mistreats the insured. Tasha looked up, one brow raised. I want it airtight, Marlene continued. I want someone neutral, someone who doesn't stand to gain, to verify my mental competency. And I want to leave most of it to someone who's actually checked if I'm still breathing. And who's that? My goddaughter. Ashley. She's a nurse in Pennsylvania. She took a bus here the night I had the stroke. Sat beside me for 6 hours. No camera, no announcements, no hashtags. Tasha nodded, flipping to a new legal pad. And your son? Marlene paused. I want it clearly documented that he doesn't inherit unless specific criteria are met. Kindness should be more profitable than cruelty. There was no bitterness in her voice, just clarity. When she returned home, Jenna barely looked up from her laptop. How was the clinic? Routine. Boring, Marlene said. Still kicking. She went straight to her room and retrieved the journal tucked beneath her nightstand. On the first page, in careful print, living evidence. Below it, she had already listed eulogy rehearsal overheard, February 9. Forged signature on David's laptop, photo saved, lawyer visit, T. Meyer, will revision in progress. She flipped to a blank page and added, Jenna didn't ask about appointment. Eyes didn't leave screen. No follow-up. It wasn't just a journal. It was a logbook, a ledger of dismissal. Because if her words were ever questioned, she wanted more than memory backing her up. She wanted a record. That weekend, she scheduled a notary appointment at the public library under the guise of needing help with estate paperwork. She wore sunglasses, used cash for the cab, and didn't bring her phone. Every signature she made that day was witnessed, time-stamped, and scanned into both physical and digital formats. She emailed copies to Tasha, one to Ashley, and one to herself, filed in a folder titled Exit Strategy. When she returned, the house smelled like bacon grease and lemon cleaner. Jenna and David were laughing in the kitchen, something about Zillow listings and natural light in the den. Marlene moved past them without a word and climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the rail. Let them plan. So was she. The next time she met with Tasha, they sat across from one another beneath a warm brass lamp. The revised will sat between them, final, crisp, signed in ink. No copies left in the house, only in hands that mattered. Tasha tapped the document gently. You understand this leaves them legally nothing, correct? Marlene nodded. They left me emotionally nothing. I call it even. Tasha looked at her for a long moment. Marlene, technically, you don't owe them a thing. Marlene smiled faintly, then opened her journal and wrote the words down. You don't owe them a thing. Her pen hovered. Then she added a second line. But I intend to make sure they know it. They wrote me off. I wrote them out. The pen in Marlene's hand didn't tremble. Not this time. She signed the final page of the trust paperwork with full, deliberate pressure, not a shaky stroke in sight. The attorney slid the document back across the desk with a slow nod, then lifted it into a flatbed scanner with a whir and a beep that sounded almost ceremonial. Outside the office window, a dull gray sky pressed down on the city. It was the kind of cold that seeped into your bones, not biting, just persistent. The same kind of cold Marlene had felt the night she overheard her own eulogy. She was done warming herself with illusions. Now she was building her fire somewhere else. Tasha, ever efficient, tapped a line highlighted in soft blue. "This is the protection clause we discussed," she said. "If any indication of coercion, fraud, or elder abuse is confirmed by a state or federal investigation, or even alleged in court, you've authorized full redirection of the estate." "To where?" "To the designated charitable fallback," Tasha said, sliding over the second document. Marlene scanned it quickly. A nonprofit that provided legal support and emergency housing for seniors facing family exploitation. "That's the one," Marlene said. "If David and Jenna can't respect my name while I'm alive, they don't get to wear it like a coat after I'm gone." Later that night, she sat by her bedroom window with a cup of weak tea and a notebook on her lap. Her fingers ran along the edges of a photograph tucked into the back cover. Ashley, around 11 years old, sitting on Marlene's porch steps in an oversized hoodie, braiding a Barbie's hair while Marlene shellacked the deck. Her sister had died when Ashley was just 10. Marlene had taken her in, no questions, no fanfare. There were school runs, ER visits, spelling tests, scraped knees, and 3 straight years of bedtime stories and tight budgets. She'd done it because that's what family meant to her, not a bloodline, but a promise. When Marlene landed in the hospital, it hadn't been David who showed up. It had been Ashley. 2 months earlier, a soft knock at the door. Marlene, groggy from morphine and half sunken in her hospital bed, blinked awake. Then, Ashley, standing in her scrubs, eyes rimmed with worry, a paper bag of toiletries in one hand and a worn novel in the other. "I thought you'd like clean socks and a real toothbrush," Ashley said, "and someone who doesn't talk to you like you're fading wallpaper." She'd stayed for hours, brushed Marlene's hair, argued with a nurse about her chart, never posted once on social media, never asked for anything but the truth. "I'm still here," Ashley had whispered before leaving that night. "Just say the word, and I'll come back." Now, weeks later, Marlene did more than say the word. She wrote it into law. Ashley was named the secondary beneficiary of the full estate, activated automatically if the primary heirs were ever legally disqualified. Marlene didn't tell her yet, not because she doubted Ashley, but because, for now, secrecy was strategy. Tasha had called it the charity clause when she drafted it. Marlene thought of it as the conscience clause. The next morning, Marlene sat at the kitchen table while Jenna bustled around making smoothies. A blender roared. Almond milk splattered on the counter. Marlene sipped instant coffee and said nothing. Jenna didn't look at her, but Marlene could feel the woman's eyes flick to her every few seconds, measuring, calculating. "David's got a big meeting this week," Jenna said casually. "It'll be nice when the house is finally paid off." Marlene nodded, serene. She had just received a text from Tasha beneath the table. DocuSign confirmed. Delivery complete. Your trust is now fully active. She looked out the window, watching a bird hop from branch to branch. Free, light, deliberate. Marlene slipped her phone back into her robe pocket and thought, let them chase windfalls. I'm already building my storm. They weren't careful with their secrets. I wasn't either. The envelope was thick, crisp, and unmistakably deliberate, marked in Marlene's tidy cursive, final will, confidential. She left it half-tucked beneath a stack of junk mail on the foyer console, a place Jenna passed at least 3 times a day. She didn't tape it shut. Didn't even seal the flap. The trap didn't need bait. Just curiosity. And entitlement. By morning, it was gone. Marlene didn't ask about it. She didn't need to. She waited. At 5:42 p.m., she heard it. Jenna's sharp footsteps across the upstairs landing, fast and frantic. Then the muffled slam of a door. Then silence. The house had the kind of silence that crackled. When David came home 40 minutes later, the front door opened harder than usual. "Marlene!" His voice cut through the hallway like a whip. She didn't answer. She simply sat in her recliner, feet elevated, knitting needles resting across her lap like silver chopsticks. Her expression was neutral, her robe zipped to the collar, her tea warm beside her. David appeared in the doorway, his face a shade pinker than his shirt. "Where the hell did you get a new will?" Marlene blinked up at him, mild. "New will? Don't—" He caught himself, ran a hand through his hair, then lowered his voice. "Jenna found an envelope with trust documents. You named Ashley. And a charity clause? What the hell is that?" Marlene tilted her head, knitting slipping slightly in her lap. "Well, I suppose if someone's worried they won't inherit, that clause would seem inconvenient." "This is manipulation," he snapped. "You're not thinking clearly." She gave a soft smile. "Maybe I was just confused again. You said that was happening, didn't you?" David's jaw clenched. "I'm not playing games, Mom." "I'm not either, sweetheart. I'm just protecting my peace." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even further. "You know what this looks like to a lawyer? Sudden changes, erratic behavior, outside influence from Ashley. That won't hold up." She looked past him to the framed photo of his college graduation on the mantel. "Neither does forged insurance paperwork. That's not great on the record either." David blinked. He hadn't expected her to say it out loud. Marlene stood slowly, placing the knitting gently aside. "Do you remember what you said when I paid your tuition in full your senior year?" His face tightened. "What does that have to do with anything?" "You said, 'Mom, I'll never forget this.'" She steps closer. "And you didn't. You just rewrote it." He opened his mouth to respond, but she held up one finger. "I'm tired now. I'll be upstairs. If you think I need to be evaluated, go ahead. I'll do it, under one condition." He hesitated. "What?" "That we record the whole thing, so everyone hears the truth, start to finish." The next morning, Marlene overheard them whispering in the kitchen. Jenna's voice was tight, brittle. "She's calling your bluff." David's was lower, but not softer. "She can't keep track of what's real. You saw how calm she was. That's not normal." "She's planning, David. She's calm because she knows exactly what she's doing." Marlene's hand moved slowly over the teacup as she sat at the kitchen table, the steam rising like breath from a quiet volcano. She didn't interject, just sipped. Let them talk. Let them scramble. She had spent months preparing for this. That afternoon, a voicemail came in from the neurologist's office. David had booked a follow-up evaluation for Marlene, due to recent cognitive changes. The message was friendly, cheerful even. "We'll be looking forward to seeing you again, Ms. Clark." Marlene saved it, then opened her scarf drawer. Nestled between the folds was a discreet, palm-sized camera, one button, high definition, a gift from Ashley. Just in case. She placed it carefully into the pocket of her overcoat and zipped it. She wouldn't flinch, she wouldn't lie, but she wouldn't go in alone either, not really. As she shut the drawer, her phone lit up again. A new notification from her encrypted backup folder. Upload scheduled, hidden cam, evaluation day. The file name, "If Anything Happens to Me." They wanted proof I was unfit. I gave them a performance worth filming. The receptionist greeted Marlene with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome back, Mrs. Clark. The doctor will see you shortly." Marlene nodded gently, her fingers clutching her handbag like it held something sacred. In truth, it did. Nested within a velvet-lined pocket of her scarf was the hidden camera. Lightweight, lens the size of a pinhead, its battery pre-charged and recording. She shuffled to the waiting area with just the right amount of stiffness. When she sat, she blinked slowly at the wall, as if trying to remember why she was even here. Across the room, David filled out paperwork with aggressive efficiency. Jenna sat beside him, scrolling on her phone, legs crossed, nails tapping the screen. Marlene's gaze didn't move, her eyes fixed on a crooked painting of a sailboat. Inside, she was cataloging everything: the scent of antiseptic, the soft hiss of the central heat, the shallow breathing of her son seated across from her like a stranger with her name on his paperwork. "Mrs. Clark?" a nurse called from the doorway. She rose with a slight stumble. David moved to help her, but she waved him off with a weak smile. "Still got a few steps left in me," she said, her voice thin and airy. "Let them think what they wanted." The psychologist's office was soft-lit, with neutral colors and an oversized chair meant to feel non-threatening. A faux fern sat in the corner beside a shelf of cognitive puzzles and memory books. "Hi, Marlene," the doctor said as she sat down across from her. "You've been referred for a competency assessment. It's standard, nothing to worry about, just a few exercises and questions." Marlene nodded, gaze foggy. "Can you tell me the year?" She squinted. 2023? Her voice lilted upward in doubt. The psychologist wrote something down. "And the name of the president?" A pause. "The new one. The tall one. Not the orange one." The psychologist stifled a laugh. Marlene smiled slightly, just enough to seem unguarded. Over the next 45 minutes, she artfully balanced hesitations with sudden bursts of clarity. She forgot the third item in a memory recall test, then quoted an Emily Dickinson poem word for word when asked about hobbies. She mixed up the order of months, but corrected herself when the doctor accidentally skipped one. It was a delicate dance, not too sharp, not too vacant, just inconsistent enough to seem frail, but never impaired. She ended the session with a polite, vacant smile, eyes wide and gentle. "Do I get a sticker?" she asked. The psychologist chuckled. "You did better than most 20-year-olds." Back in the waiting room, David stood when she emerged. "Well?" he asked the doctor. "We'll file a full report," she replied, professional but firm. "But preliminarily, I see no evidence of cognitive decline. Your mother's very much aware." David's mouth twitched. Jenna muttered, "Unbelievable," under her breath. That evening, Marlene returned home and unwrapped her scarf slowly, laying it across the dining room table. She opened her laptop and connected the device via USB. The footage loaded cleanly. Her slow blinking, her hesitant answers, the offhanded remarks David made in the hallway about speeding this up. She trimmed the file, titled it, and uploaded it to a secure drive. The folder already had a name, "If Anything Happens to Me." Inside were 4 files so far. Forged insurance policy scan voicemail from neurologist final will, signed hidden cam, competency evil.mp4. She closed the laptop slowly, heart steady. Let them keep planning. She was already documenting the autopsy of their intentions. The upload pinged complete. Marlene clicked share and typed one address. ashley.lawrence.rn@protonmail.com. Subject line, "Hold this for me, just in case. They took away my keys. I took away their leverage." The moment Marlene saw the blank space in her wallet where her credit card used to be, her fingers went cold. She didn't say anything, just closed the flap, zipped the wallet slowly, and set it gently on the kitchen counter. Jenna stood across from her, swirling almond milk into her protein shake like nothing had happened. "You canceled my card," Marlene said flatly. Jenna didn't even look up. "It was for safety. You nearly gave your number to that spam caller last week. I hung up before I said anything." "Well, you looked confused, and David agreed it was time." She sipped from her glass. "You still have everything you need. If you want anything, just ask." Marlene nodded once, not bothering to disguise the calm rage tightening her jaw. That night, after dinner, she retrieved her old rotary checkbook from the cedar box in the attic. She hadn't used it in years, since before David got married. She ran her fingers over the cover, embossed with her initials in fading gold foil. Still intact, still hers. The next day, while Jenna thought she was napping, Marlene took a cab downtown. The driver, a young man who smelled faintly of cigarettes and mint gum, offered to wait while she ran errands. She smiled and said, "No need, sweetheart. I'm just disappearing a little." She paid cash at the USPS counter for a private P.O. box. No questions, no paper trail connected to David's address. Then she walked 2 blocks to a prepaid wireless kiosk and bought a burner phone. Basic, black, nothing flashy. She gave the store her maiden name and her high school graduation year as her birthday. The girl behind the counter didn't blink. That evening, after dinner, roast chicken Jenna barely salted, Marlene took her new phone out to the garden, where the porch lights didn't quite reach. She dialed Ashley's number from memory. "Marlene?" Ashley answered, a mix of surprise and warmth. "Is everything okay?" "No," Marlene said, her voice low. "But it will be. I need you to initiate the medical proxy paperwork we talked about." Ashley didn't hesitate. "Say the word, and it's done. Do you want me to bring it to you?" "Yes," Marlene said. "Not here. I'll send you a location. It'll be under my name, my real one." Ashley's voice softened. "You're not alone, you know." "I know," Marlene said. "That's why I called you." 2 days later, Ashley handed her the medical proxy paperwork inside a thrift store fitting room. They hugged briefly behind the curtain. "You sure about this?" Ashley asked, smoothing the papers out against the wall. "If they ever try to admit me again, you're the only voice I want in that room," Marlene said. They both signed, hands trembling for different reasons. As Ashley packed the forms back into her folder, she paused, frowning. "What?" Marlene asked. Ashley pulled out the orange prescription bottle from her coat pocket. "You left this in my bag the last time I visited. I meant to call, but I checked the dosage. Something's off." Marlene blinked. "Off how?" Ashley held the bottle between them. "The label says 20 milligrams, but the pills inside are clearly 40. I'm a nurse. I know the difference." The wind shifted outside. A dry leaf scratched against the side of the building. "You think they—" Marlene started. "I don't know yet," Ashley said. "But it wasn't a pharmacy error. Someone tampered with it. And if the dosage had continued unchecked—" Marlene leaned back against the wall, breath catching. "I'm filing a report," Ashley said, quietly. "If anything happens, they're going to look into everything." Marlene nodded slowly, the cold metal hook of the coat rack pressing into her back. She'd known betrayal, but now it had shape, intention. She wasn't just being erased, she was being weakened. Ashley zipped the bottle into her purse and whispered, "I'll handle this. But you need to stay sharp." Marlene didn't flinch. "I've never been sharper. They weren't trying to kill me, just weaken me, slowly." Ashley stood in the fluorescent glare of the hospital break room, eyes fixed on the pharmacy printouts spread across the table like evidence in a trial. The fluorescent light buzzed above her head, and the coffee pot behind her clicked to a new cycle. Marlene's name was right there, bold at the top of each page, but the dosage changes didn't match the official prescribing records on file. "I knew it," Ashley whispered. She cross-referenced again. The bottle Marlene had been using was labeled 20 milligrams, but someone with access, had signed for early refills of 40 milligram pills. Not once, but twice. And both times the pharmacist had marked them as requested by authorized caregiver. Ashley didn't need to guess who that was. She took a photo of the documents, then folded them neatly into her satchel, her fingers trembling with controlled fury. Back at home, Marlene watered the succulents in her kitchen windowsill. The morning light warmed her arms, but her mind was elsewhere, sharp and locked onto the moment Ashley's voice had dropped to a whisper in the thrift store. "Someone tampered with your meds." David had always insisted on organizing her pill box each week. "You've earned a break, Mom," he said. "Let us take care of the little things." Now, she saw the little things for what they were. Erosion. Not a cliff fall, but a slow crumble. Fatigue that didn't add up. Brain fog that felt foreign. Subtle shifts in energy that for a while she'd blamed on age or recovery. But now she blamed them on control. Ashley called that afternoon. "I filed the report," she said. "Anonymous, as you asked. I also flagged the refill records with the state board. They're going to look into it, quietly at first." "Quietly works," Marlene replied, her voice like still water. Ashley exhaled. "They might reach out for more information. Be prepared." "I already am," Marlene said. She hung up and, within minutes, logged into her secure folder. She uploaded the photos, the timestamps, and the medical proxy document. Each file labeled, each step recorded. She wasn't just fighting suspicion now. She was gathering proof of a pattern. That evening, Marlene sat at the kitchen table folding laundry while Jenna hovered nearby, slicing carrots for what she called a fresh detox soup. "Your energy's been better lately," Jenna said, not looking up. "I started managing my pills again," Marlene said, casual. Jenna paused. "Oh? I figured I'd feel more independent." Jenna smiled tightly. "Well, that's good. We were just trying to help, you know." "Of course," Marlene said. "Help comes in all kinds of disguises." There was silence, then the sharp thud of a knife against the cutting board. Jenna broke it first. "David's looking into a memory care center. Just options for the future, no pressure." Marlene folded a towel in half, then again, slow and deliberate. "If I forget who I am, at least I won't remember how you looked when you said that." Jenna's face flushed, but she turned away. The next day, Jenna's phone buzzed at her desk during a brand pitch meeting. She glanced down, frowning. Unknown number, government prefix. She stepped out into the hallway and answered. "This is Jenna Clark." A pause. Then a smooth official voice. "Hello, Mrs. Clark. I'm with the New York State Department of Health. We've received a report regarding home care irregularities concerning your mother-in-law, Marlene Clark." Jenna's breath hitched. "I'm calling to schedule a home inspection. We'll be reviewing medication storage, dosage records, and caregiver authorizations." I don't understand." "It's routine, but required. Please expect our team within the next 7 to 10 business days." The line went dead. Jenna stared at the phone, pulse pounding, then slowly turned toward the glass conference room, where David sat, smiling, mid-presentation. She didn't interrupt, but her hand began to tremble. They used to hide their disgust. Now they had to hide their panic. The doorbell rang at 8:17 a.m., sharp, urgent, like someone trying to be polite but not too polite. Marlene had just finished pouring her tea, the scent of Earl Grey curling into the quiet morning. She moved slowly, deliberately, and opened the front door to reveal two people standing on the porch, one in a plain blazer holding a clipboard, the other with a badge clipped to his coat. "Mrs. Marlene Clark?" the woman asked. "Yes. We're from the New York State Department of Health and Human Services. We're here to conduct a wellness check." Marlene didn't blink. "Of course," she said, stepping aside. "Would you like a cup of tea while you inspect whether or not I'm being slowly poisoned?" The agents exchanged a glance. "Ma'am," the man said, a little thrown, "this is just to confirm basic safety and care standards. It won't take long." "Oh, I hope not," she replied. "I've got a podcast interview at 10. They moved through the house room by room. The woman agent asked gentle but pointed questions. "Do you manage your own medication?" "Now I do," Marlene answered. "Didn't always." "Do you feel safe in this environment?" Marlene met her eyes without hesitation. "Not always, but I'm safer than they think." In the kitchen, the inspector examined the cabinet labeled MEDS. 3 bottles sat in a tidy row. One of them, marked 20 milligrams, was missing the official pharmacy label. The inspector jotted something down. The male agent opened the fridge, peered into the garbage bin, and noticed the dated schedule pinned to the corkboard. A line had been scratched out. "Jenna's pill prep, Sundays." Outside, a neighbor across the street was watering her flowers. She squinted at the clipboard and suits. Marlene didn't wave. She didn't need to. Let it spread. At 10:02 a.m., Marlene sat at her desk with headphones snug over her ears. Across the Zoom screen was Eliza Sharp, host of the award-winning elder advocacy podcast, Under Their Roof. "Ready when you are," Eliza said, her voice warm but charged. Marlene took a breath. "I heard my own eulogy while I was still alive," she began. "They were in the next room." She told the story, not all of it, not the legal pieces, but enough to draw the outlines of betrayal, neglect, and erasure. She kept her voice even. No tears, just clarity. "They didn't plan my death. They planned their convenience." The episode aired 3 days later. Titled, "I Heard My Eulogy While Still Alive," it opened with Marlene's calm, clipped words layered over soft piano. By noon, it was trending. Listeners flooded the comments with their own stories. Forgotten mothers, controlling daughters-in-law, passive sons. The empathy came in waves, outraged, heartbroken, galvanized. And then came the fallout. Jenna was in the middle of pitching a rebranding campaign to a pharmaceutical client when her phone buzzed again. The 10th notification that hour. Her inbox was exploding. Subject: public statement. Subject: elder abuse allegations. Subject: client concern, podcast mention. She pulled up Twitter. A listener had tagged her company's official handle beneath the podcast link. Is this the same Jenna Clark who works in PR? This is not the look. Her stomach sank. She looked up and met her supervisor's eyes across the glass boardroom wall. The woman's jaw was tight, and she gestured for Jenna to come outside. Inside, Jenna's phone buzzed again. Subject: termination clause inquiry. First View Health. Meanwhile, David was reviewing contracts in his office when his assistant appeared at his door, pale. Your noon client just canceled. What? Why? They forwarded this. She handed over a printed email. At the top was a link. Podcast: I heard my eulogy while still alive. Elder exploitation in modern families beneath it. The client's message. Given the optics, we're postponing all collaborations until further notice. This isn't something we can be adjacent to. David stared at the paper. His throat was suddenly dry. What the hell is this? He muttered. But he knew. He knew. At home, Marlene folded laundry with the window open. She could hear the hum of the neighbor's lawnmower, the faint ding of her email. She opened her inbox. Subject: episode reached 100,000 in 24 hours. You broke us. The email ended with, you made them listen. David slammed his office door and pulled out his phone. Missed call from Jenna. New voicemail. Subject line: what did you do, Mom? They didn't own their home. I did. Marlene stood in line at the bank, her cane in one hand, her black leather folder pressed tightly to her side. A kid behind her tapped the metal post of the queue with a bored rhythm, but she didn't flinch. She stared ahead, eyes fixed on the next teller sign. They had planned everything: the soup, the pills, the soft silence of slow erasure. But they'd forgotten the paperwork, the dry, quiet kind that didn't make noise until it showed up in certified mail. Next, the teller called. Marlene stepped forward, slid the folder across the glass, and gave her name. I need to speak with someone in loan servicing, she said. Cosigner authority. Mortgage reference ending in 0918. The teller blinked, then nodded. Right away, ma'am. Please have a seat. 30 minutes later, she sat across from a woman in a slate-colored blouse and rimless glasses. Her nameplate read, Elaine Monroe, Senior Home Lending Officer. Marlene placed 2 documents on the table between them, the original cosign agreement from 2017 and a notarized letter prepared by her attorney. Elaine scanned them silently. This clause, Marlene said, pointing, the one that gives the cosigner the right to reclaim equity stake or force a partial buyout in the event of financial misconduct. Elaine looked up, eyes sharpening. You're invoking it? Yes. You understand what that means? I do. Elaine sat back. Ma'am, this will change the ownership structure. It forces renegotiation of the terms, monthly payments, insurance distribution, equity splits. It'll hit them hard. I'm aware. May I ask what prompted the decision? Marlene folded her hands calmly. They forgot who helped them buy that roof. Elaine didn't ask more. 3 days later, a courier arrived at David and Jenna's doorstep with a thick certified envelope marked Mortgage Reallocation Notification. Jenna signed for it, confused. David tore it open at the dining room table while their dinner sat untouched. His eyes moved. Across the first paragraph, then the second, then froze on the third. What is it? Jenna asked. He didn't speak. Jenna snatched it from his hands and scanned it herself. Wait. What is this? What does this mean? He swallowed. She enacted the cosigner clause. Clause? She's reclaiming partial ownership. Jenna's voice rose, shrill and sharp. She can't do this, can she? David's mouth opened, then closed. He didn't have an answer. Outside, the lawn sprinklers kicked on, hissing like a warning. At her kitchen table, Marlene opened a letter of her own, a formal confirmation from the bank. She read it slowly, underlined one line twice with her pen. Effective immediately, your name has been reinstated as equity stakeholder. She poured herself a cup of tea, letting the steam fog her glasses for a moment. Then she walked it out to the porch, where the breeze lifted her gray hair at the temples. She wasn't taking revenge. She was reclaiming real estate, financial and emotional. That night, Jenna paced the bedroom. "She's trying to bankrupt us," she hissed. "This is warfare." David rubbed his forehead, the letter still in his lap. "She's not wrong, though. She did co-sign, and legally, she can do this. This is because of the podcast. She's doing this to humiliate us. She's doing this because she finally figured out she can." Jenna stopped pacing. And David didn't defend Marlene, but he didn't blame her either. Jenna picked up the phone, hands shaking, and dialed the only lawyer she knew who worked fast. When the voicemail picked up, she screamed into the silence. "She can't do this, can she?" When entitled people panic, they spin stories. The first photo dropped on a Tuesday afternoon. A sun-dappled image of Marlene in a rocking chair, wrapped in a floral blanket, with Jenna crouched beside her, smiling like a campaign ad. The caption read, "Family means everything, even when it's complicated. Doing our best to care for Mom every day. Gratitude, dear family first." Marlene saw it by accident, if you can call being tagged in a performance accidental. She stared at the screen for a long time, unmoving, as if she were trying to see past the filter they'd chosen to smooth out her skin and mute the contrast. Jenna had posted it on her professional account too. The comments were already flooding in. "You're amazing for taking care of her. She's lucky to have you. Don't let the haters bring you down. You're clearly doing your best." There was even a slideshow, a birthday cake she hadn't tasted, a walk she didn't remember agreeing to, a quote misattributed to her, "I don't know where I'd be without them." Marlene let out a short laugh. It wasn't bitter, it was something stranger, like disbelief finally giving way to understanding. By Friday, they posted a video. David, standing in the garden, a little forced but polished, said into the camera, "We just want to make sure Mom is comfortable and safe. That's all we've ever wanted." Behind him, Marlene sat in her wicker chair, the same floral blanket draped over her lap. But her eyes didn't meet the camera. They were staring straight ahead, vacant, like someone cast in the wrong role. Ashley texted 30 minutes later, "You need to respond. Their version is already making rounds in caregiver forums." That Sunday, Marlene hosted a brunch at St. Augustine's Fellowship Hall, a modest, sunlit room with folding chairs and the smell of lemon polish. The women from her church, some friends, some acquaintances, brought covered dishes, plastic forks, and warm hands. She wore navy slacks and a cream blouse. Her walker leaned nearby, untouched. Ashley, quietly in the background, recorded on a handheld camera. Not with fanfare, just documentation. One by one, women stood beside Marlene and spoke. "She leads Bible study every other Wednesday. She taught me how to apply for senior housing. Saved my neck. She called me the night my husband died, stayed on the phone until sunrise. She still balances the books for our charity fundraiser, by hand." There were no theatrics, no scripts, just proof. Quiet, undeniable proof of clarity, of capacity, of a woman whose story wasn't finished. When it was Marlene's turn, she stood. Her voice didn't tremble. "I may walk slower now, but I still walk straight, and I still recognize exploitation when I see it, no matter how nicely it's captioned." She looked directly into the lens. Kindness that needs an audience isn't kindness. It's a campaign. The next day, Marlene's attorney, Tasha Meyer, filed a formal affidavit with the family court. Attached to it was a notarized letter from Delia James, Marlene's former part-time home aide. Marlene hadn't seen Delia in over a year. The young woman had moved to Buffalo, started nursing school, but when Ashley tracked her down and explained what was happening, Delia didn't hesitate. The letter was precise and devastating. It detailed Jenna refusing to let Marlene adjust her own medication, scheduled David instructing Delia not to confuse Marlene with financial questions. A day Marlene was left alone for 7 hours without food after her son forgot to check on her. The affidavit landed in the inboxes of Jenna's firm and David's partners. This wasn't a smear campaign, this was receipts. Later that night, Marlene sat at her kitchen table and turned her phone off completely. She didn't care to scroll. She didn't need to track their responses. The game had flipped, and this time, she wasn't the one playing defense. As the affidavit hit the county court's docket, Tasha texted Marlene just one line. "You ready for the next move?" Marlene replied, "Let's talk about the insurance." If I'm the insured, Marlene thought, staring at her reflection in the microwave door, I get to make the call. She waited until the house was empty. Jenna had left for work in a blazer and sneakers, one of those desperate hybrid outfits that suggested the day might bring anything. David said something vague about meetings downtown before rushing out, not bothering to meet Marlene's eyes. It was time. Marlene sat at the kitchen table with her burner phone, her reading glasses, and a manila folder of meticulously organized documents. Her will, her trust, the notarized cosigner letter, and a copy of the forged life insurance policy, annotated in red ink, with her real signature beside the falsified one for comparison. She dialed the number she'd triple-checked 2 nights ago, just before bed. "Welcome to Clearwater Mutual Life Insurance. This call may be recorded for quality assurance. Please enter your policy number." She entered it, heart steady. The line rang once, twice, then, "This is Kimberly, Senior Account Advisor. Who am I speaking with?" "Marlene Clark. I'm calling regarding policy ending in 7543. "Yes, ma'am. Can you verify your date of birth?" She did. "Perfect. What can I help you with today?" There was a long pause. "I believe there has been a fraudulent change made to my policy," Marlene said calmly. "I'm the policyholder, but the signature on the beneficiary update form isn't mine." Kimberly's voice shifted instantly, professional curiosity turning razor-sharp. "Can you tell me more?" "I have proof. A side-by-side signature comparison. I've had it reviewed by a lawyer, and I'm prepared to file a fraud report with the state." "I see," Kimberly said. "Would you be willing to upload the documentation to our fraud review team portal?" "I already have," Marlene replied. "Check case file number 49382. It should be there under M. Clark Submission." A pause as Kimberly typed. "I see it. I'm escalating this immediately. Ms. Clark, thank you for bringing this to our attention." "You're welcome," she said, voice steady, almost kind. "I understand my son is listed as the beneficiary?" "Yes, David Clark." "Well," Marlene said, folding her hands neatly over the folder, "until this is resolved, I'd like the policy frozen. No disbursement activity, no changes, full suspension." "We can initiate that today," Kimberly confirmed. "He will be notified via email. You will receive confirmation within the hour." Marlene smiled, more to herself than anyone else. "Please include in the message that this is due to documentation irregularities reported by the insured." "Understood." By the time David got the email, it was 3:14 p.m. He was sitting in a coffee shop downtown, tapping at his laptop while Jenna ranted quietly across the table about bad optics, narrative war, and losing control of the family story. His phone buzzed. From Clearwater Mutual Subject, Beneficiary Access Frozen Pending Fraud Review. He opened it. Due to documentation discrepancies and active investigation initiated by the policyholder, all account activity has been suspended until further notice. No funds will be disbursed. Please do not attempt to modify this account. His heart dropped. He refreshed his inbox. Another email appeared. From Tasha Meyer, Escree. Subject: Pending Civil Inquiry. Coercion and Forgery Review. Attached, a formal request for David to submit handwriting samples to a third-party handwriting expert. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup until the cardboard gave a soft crack. Across the table, Jenna went silent. "What now?" she asked. David just turned the screen toward her. She read it once, then again, then said nothing. That evening, Marlene sat on the front porch in her housecoat, the air cool on her cheeks, the scent of cut grass drifting in from the neighbor's lawn. She didn't need to look at her email. She already knew the message had gone through. This wasn't revenge. It was reversal. Back in the kitchen, her phone buzzed with a new text. From Ashley. "Check your mail tomorrow. It's finally happening. Marlene smiled. The only thing sweeter than closure was confirmation. You can't inherit from someone who legally declares you abusive. The sentence was printed in bold at the top of the formal complaint. Tasha slid across the conference room table. Marlene didn't need to read it again. She already had the words memorized. They rang like bells in her mind. Low, resonant, final. Are you sure? Tasha asked, her pen poised just above the signature line. Once this is filed, we're past the point of negotiation. Marlene didn't flinch. They passed that point months ago. Outside the window, the rain blurred the streetlights into soft halos. It was quiet here, unlike the chaos she imagined was beginning to unfurl in David and Jenna's carefully curated world. Quiet was how justice entered sometimes, on silent feet, carrying the truth like a torch. That afternoon, Tasha filed an elder abuse declaration under the New York State Protection of Vulnerable Adults Act. The complaint included Ashley's affidavit documenting the swapped medication, Delia's notarized letter describing neglect and psychological manipulation, the forged insurance signature, accompanied by handwriting analysis, audio snippets from the competency evaluation where David's offhanded remarks had been preserved. With the submission, Tasha activated a clause embedded months earlier into Marlene's trust, the incompetent heir clause. Quietly genius, devastating in application, it had one rule. Any heir found to have manipulated, endangered, or coerced, the truster would be immediately and irrevocably removed from all assets. In legal terms, David and Jenna were no longer heirs. They were liabilities. The next morning, David received the letter via courier. Jenna watched him open it at the kitchen island, coffee gone cold beside him. He didn't speak at first, just stared. Then he handed it to her. She read aloud, her voice catching, "This letter is to confirm the formal removal of David Clark and Jenna Clark from the Clark Family Trust and Will, in accordance with Clause 14b. This action follows substantiated evidence of undue influence and negligent care." She dropped the page. David pushed his chair back, the legs screeching across the tile. "This isn't real," he muttered. "She can't do this," Jenna said, breathless. "She just did." Marlene received her own copy 2 hours later. She read it in her robe, by the fireplace, a blanket over her lap, and tea cooling at her elbow. She didn't smile. This wasn't triumph. It was release. She walked into her room, opened the cedar box one last time, and removed the original copy of her 2013 will, the one that had once promised David everything. She held it for a long moment, then quietly fed it through her shredder, the blades devouring each page like a hungry truth. 3 days later, Ashley found a certified letter waiting in her apartment mailbox in Pennsylvania. She opened it cautiously, assuming more paperwork related to the proxy or health reports. Instead, it was embossed in navy ink, formal and direct. By the authority vested under the Clark Trust, and following activation of Clause 14b, you are hereby designated sole beneficiary and appointed executor of the estate of Marlene Elaine Clark. Ashley stood motionless in her hallway, breath shallow, letter trembling in her hands. Beneath it, in Marlene's familiar cursive, was a post-it note. "For choosing to show up when no one asked you to. I see you, and I trust you. Aunt M." Meanwhile, in a modest white office in Midtown, Tasha forwarded copies of all legal correspondence to Clearwater Mutual, the bank, and the county clerk's office. Subject line, finalized, beneficiary correction, trust amended. Inside her notes was one short sentence: "No further heirs under contest." David spent that evening staring at an empty spreadsheet, his phone buzzing with unread messages from their accountant. Jenna didn't speak. Her laptop sat closed for once. No hashtags, no edits, no captions left to craft. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, silence swallowed the house. Back in her warm kitchen, Ashley held the letter to her chest as her phone lit up with a new text from Marlene. "Come visit when you're ready. I'll make that lemon cake you liked." Ashley replied, "I'll bring the forks. If my name is on the check, my name should be on the cause." The pen glided across the donation agreement with quiet authority. Marlene's hand steady as ever. The conference room at Fairstone Legal Aid smelled of fresh carpet glue and lemon polish, but to her it smelled like resolve. Across the table, the nonprofit director beamed. "You're the first donor to earmark this much directly for elder advocacy," she said. "It's significant." Marlene leaned back slightly in her chair. "So is what it protects." The final line of the agreement read, "Purpose: Establishment of the Clark Fund for Vulnerable Seniors. Initial grant, $250,000. Beside it, a stipulation. The fund's mission would focus exclusively on women over 60, those navigating legal, financial, or emotional abuse within their own families. I want women like me," Marlene said, "to know that being someone's mother doesn't mean being someone's target." The press release hit quietly without fanfare or photos. That was intentional. This wasn't about optics. Marlene declined interviews, declined profiles, declined her own spotlight. But word spread anyway. Within a week, the fund had received over 70 letters from women across the state, many handwritten, some typed in shaky fonts. One woman wrote, "They told me I was forgetful. Turns out I was just ignored." Another, "I sleep with a chair against my bedroom door. You reminded me I'm not crazy." Marlene printed every single one. She stored them in a blue binder on her kitchen counter. It sat beside her sugar jar, always in reach. She didn't stop there. With Ashley's help and a small team of volunteers from the church, she launched the Not Done Yet project, a community-led initiative that hosted monthly workshops, helped file restraining orders, assisted with digital fraud literacy, and held private story circles where women could speak without interruption. The first meeting took place in a church basement with mismatched chairs and a broken water dispenser. 15 women showed up. 11 of them cried. All of them stayed the full 2 hours. Ashley watched Marlene from the side, a clipboard in hand. "You were born for this," she whispered as they cleaned up afterward. "No," Marlene said, stacking chairs. "I was remade for it." One gray afternoon, as Marlene sat folding pamphlets at her dining table, the doorbell rang. Ashley was in the kitchen slicing lemons for tea. "Want me to get it?" Marlene shook her head. "Number I think I already know." She opened the door to find David standing on the front step, shoulders squared, but face uncertain. "I heard about the fund," he said, "and I know everything that's happened. He exhaled. "I thought maybe I could talk to you, face to face." Marlene didn't speak for a moment. She studied his eyes, still brown, still familiar, but no longer readable. "I don't hate you," she said. "I didn't come for forgiveness." "Good," she replied. "I'm not handing that out today." David shifted on his feet. "I just wanted to understand what comes next." Marlene tilted her head. "You mean now that you're not in control?" He looked down. She stepped back slightly, not to let him in, but to reclaim her doorway. "I have work to do," she said. "Mom?" She smiled, kind but immovable. "David, I'm not the story you get to rewrite anymore." And then, gently, she closed the door. Ashley handed her a mug of hot lemon tea as she returned to the table. "Want to talk about it?" she asked. Marlene took a slow sip, savoring the citrus and honey. "Already did," she said, "to a room full of women who actually listen." They both laughed, quiet, knowing. That night, as she filed one final form before bed, an email pinged her inbox. Subject: National Recognition Nomination, Elder Impact Awards. She clicked it open. Her name filled the first line. And just beneath it, Marlene Clark, a legacy written while alive. They can rehearse all they want, but I'm not in the audience anymore. The lake was still, not perfectly, just enough to hold the reflection of a dawn sky bruised pink at the edges. Marlene sat wrapped in a flannel shawl on the porch of a cedar cottage she now owned outright. No co-signers, no hidden conditions, just her name on the deed, burned into the wood frame of her piece. A kettle whistled softly from inside. She moved slower these days, but not uncertainly. She poured her tea with both hands, the smell of chamomile curling into the morning air. The mug read, "Not done yet." Ashley had made it. The cottage had once belonged to a retired piano teacher. She'd left the metronome behind. It still sat on the mantel, ticking steadily even when untouched. Marlene never turned it off. It reminded her that life didn't need applause to keep time. Every morning she'd sit out on the porch as the wind stirred the birch leaves and the light fractured across the water. There was a quiet here that didn't feel empty, just earned. She flipped open her phone. A message from Ashley, photo attached. Marlene tapped it, and the image bloomed on screen. Ashley standing in front of the brand-new Clark Women's Center for Advocacy and Recovery, scissors in hand, ribbon curling at her feet. Behind her, on the brick wall, was a plaque, in honor of Marlene Clark, for the stories she refused to let die. Marlene didn't cry. She just pressed the photo to her chest and whispered, "Good." Inside the cabin, she kept a small box. Not for keepsakes, but for closures. Letters she'd received from women across the country. One from a judge who said her testimony changed state-level elder law review. One from a young lawyer who said, "You're the reason I changed my specialty." But there was one she hadn't opened. It arrived a week ago. From David. The envelope was plain, no return address. Just her name, in that familiar, slanted handwriting, the same she'd once seen on crayon. Birthday cards and high school essays. She hadn't read it yet. She still didn't. She tucked it deeper into the box. Let some words stay buried. Later that evening, Ashley called. "They want to name you keynote at the national conference," she said. Marlene smiled. "I've said enough." Ashley laughed. "That's exactly why they want you." They talked a while. About community center plumbing. About Marlene's lemon bars. About nothing much. It was the kind of talk that didn't need fixing. It just stayed. When they hung up, Marlene wandered back out onto the porch. A loon called across the lake. The scent of pine mixed with the faint sweetness of damp earth and distant wood smoke. She looked up at the stars beginning to appear. No house alarm, no staged photos, no watching her own erasure with a smile, just her voice, her version, set in stone. Somewhere out there, maybe in another kitchen, another conference room, another curated post, David and Jenna were still spinning their stories, trying to reclaim something that was never fully theirs. Maybe they'd rehearse her eulogy again someday. Maybe they'd make it sound like they knew her, like they loved her once. But this time, there wouldn't be a check waiting at the end. There wouldn't be silence either. Final shot, Marlene, sitting at the edge of the dock, her reflection rippling in the lake beneath her. The camera slowly zooms out as her voice echoes over the water. "You don't get to write my ending." "I already did." She rises with the help of her cane, walks toward the cottage, step by step, steady and proud. She pauses at the threshold, turns once, briefly, and smiles. "The next time they practice my eulogy, they'll have to do it without a cent of mine." Fade to black.